Hello and welcome to NJBIZ Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Kanige. My guest today is a former state attorney general, now a partner at Lowenstein Sandler, and a great friend of the show, Chris Porrino. Chris, welcome back.
Hello, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. Regular viewers also know that Chris chairs the State Criminal Sentencing and Disposition Commission, which just issued a report back in the fall or early winter. And there are a bunch of things I wanted to talk to you about, but I wanted to start right there because the report did come out fairly recently, as I recall, four main recommendations. One of which has to do with eliminating mandatory sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, a new mitigating factor that allows judges to consider whether a defendant suffered prior abuse, and a way to reduce sentences for prisoners who have served lengthy terms. Those were the first three. What's been the reception? I know some of those had legislation attached to them. What's been the reception in the legislature that you've gotten to those? I'll get to the fourth one in a second because I wanted to ask you about that specifically. But let's start there with those first three.
So I would say that the legislature has been eerily quiet
Okay.
up to this point, and that is something that we're going to do our best to address. And I'm going to try and call on some of the relationships that I forged while I was in government and have maintained since leaving government to try and see if we can move things along. Because as I've said, perhaps to you, and I've said publicly a number of times, those three reforms and the fourth, which we'll talk about in a minute, I
Hmm.
characterize as no-brainers.
Okay.
Really, all we're asking is that judges, and now these are judges who are appointed, nominated by the governor and confirmed by the Senate, right? So
Hmm.
these are folks who we all have placed our trust in, that they be given the discretion that effectively these reforms untie the judge's hands to
Okay.
make some decisions where
Mhm.
they think it's fair and appropriate to either let someone out of jail or not, honor what has previously been and up to now been mandatory minimum sentences.
Okay. All right. So again, been quiet. As I said, I don't recall there was one of them that didn't have legislation attached to it, but there were bills at least in previous sessions. Is that going to be the case now? I mean, or are there sponsors lined up for some of these things?
There
Okay.
are sponsors lined up. There hasn't been a lot of movement lately, but again, as we get into the new year here, I'm hopeful, and I will remain optimistic unless I'm given a reason not to be optimistic.
Okay.
It's
Well,
yeah. So we'll see, but we're going to keep pushing, and I think we'll get these done. And on the one that didn't have legislation already pending, we actually wrote a piece of legislation
right. I saw that.
addressing that is on the fourth one.
Right.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned that you did write some legislative language to help move this along. The fourth one is a recommendation to allow judges to waive fines and other financial penalties, and I was interested in that because the commission suggests that the fines A are often not collected, and B sometimes they're worth less than the costs of actually going out and collecting them, which sounds like a bad business when you get right down to it.
Well, again, it's in the category of a no-brainer,
Right.
right? Why not give judges discretion to decide whether to impose fines, penalties, and costs on an individual who we know cannot pay?
Right.
What is the upside in doing that? Because as you said, and the evidence shows that trying to collect money from people who can't pay expends resources that are precious, costs money, and for what? For what purpose? Plus, you've got, not only is it fiscally irresponsible to do that, when you think about the social impacts on the individuals who have the
Right.
fines imposed on them and the challenges that those fines and penalties create for people trying to rehabilitate themselves, it runs counter to everything we're trying to do by way of criminal justice reform. What is the reason to do it? And the answer is there is no reason.
Okay.
And I am, I think, look, there has been, you know, uh, issues with respect to criminal activity and deterring criminal activity, politically at least, ebb and flow.
Hmm.
In some years, everybody wants to get tough on crime, and in other years, people are worried about the rights of defendants. These reforms don't, you know, don't impact the tough on crime stance that
Right.
I think we should have. What they do is they create a fairer criminal justice system. And
Mhm.
why isn't that something that everyone wants? And I think it is. So it's just a question I'm hoping of focus, and we're going to try and bring that focus to the legislature, and hopefully we'll get these done.
Right. And I didn't mean to make light of the financial side of this and the sort of social part of that particular recommendation, because as I understand it, in doing some reading about this, those kinds of penalties very often, as you said, make it difficult for people to get a second start, and it puts them behind the eight ball in more ways than one financially, and it seems to me is counterproductive in sort of driving them back into the life that led them into this trouble in the first place.
It accomplishes nothing. And when you look at all of the great work that Governor McGreevey did on reentry for
Right.
all of these years, and all the momentum that's been created around those initiatives, when you look at bail reform, the Criminal Justice Reform Act of 2017, all of these things are pointed in that same direction, right? If we can have a fairer process, if we cannot disadvantage people who are already disadvantaged, right? And we're not going to accomplish any societal goal by placing additional detainers on them and additional impediments and obstacles to their rehabilitation. Why would we do it?
Right.
Why would we do it? And so, because it's inescapable to me that these reforms make sense, the legislatures, I believe, will get around to it. Just a question of when.
Okay. Well, then that leads me to the next question, which the commission has come out with reports in the past, made recommendations in the past. Has the legislature generally been receptive to those kinds of things, and how successful has the commission been in making and seeing its recommendations actually enacted into law?
Yeah, I think the success has been mixed. There definitely have been recommendations that were adopted and became law. We picked as a commission when the commission was reformed in early 2024, four areas that we thought would be so-called low-hanging fruit,
Hmm.
things that really could impact the system as it's currently operating, things that were straightforward, things that were relatively easy to implement. And so, I dare say that if we can't get these or most of these done, then we've got deeper issues in the state of New Jersey that we got to be worried about.
Okay, well, we actually do have deeper issues. Probably, I don't know how much people are worrying about them, but that does lead to the next issue, and that is it is an election year. There's a gubernatorial election and assembly elections. Is there likely to be progress on these kinds of things given that backdrop, given the exigencies of a political of a high profile political campaign, at least for this state?
Yeah. So look, my background, Jeff, is as a lawyer and as in law enforcement. For the time that I served as Attorney General, I'm not qualified to evaluate the politics here,
Right.
but I did see the system work, and I
Okay.
have seen it work both from the inside and from the outside. And I truly do not view these issues as politically charged. And I think it's a matter of education and a matter of focus, because I haven't yet met anyone who can explain to me why any one of these reforms, right? Why
Right.
why fining people who can't pay fines, why not giving judges discretion to release prisoners who are over 60 years of age and have served 20 years in jail already. Not that they're automatically released, but that judges have discretion to release them. Why there shouldn't be a mitigating factor at sentencing for defendants who committed a crime against someone who previously abused them. Why in the world where domestic violence continues to be rampant, wouldn't that be a mitigating factor that a judge could consider at sentencing? Again, doesn't mean the judge has to consider it. Doesn't mean the person is not going to go to jail. It's just a factor.
Right.
And eliminating, some of the mandatory minimums for non-violent drug offenses is consistent with all of the literature and and all of the study that's been done up to now. So, I just don't view these issues as politically charged. I get that directionally, everyone wants to be tough on crime. By the way, I happen to agree. I don't think
Mhm.
anyone would say that, during my time as Attorney General, we were not focused on violent crime.
Right. Right.
These issues do not run counter to the fight against crime. And so,
Okay.
yeah, like I said, I'm going to stay optimistic.
Okay. Well, and public opinion does go back and forth. I mean, if I recall correctly, a lot of these kinds of things like mandatory minimum sentences were enacted to take discretion away from judges.
Right.
Has the pendulum swung back now to say maybe we went too far and maybe judges actually should be allowed to do the job we appointed them to do?
I mean, that's the point we're making. And if we take the time and give the attention to the process of appointing and confirming our judges, why wouldn't we give them the discretion to consider facts and to consider circumstances?
Hmm.
Why do we need a bright line rule? I don't hear any legislators saying we don't trust the judges that they themselves confirmed.
Right.
So um yeah, so I look, that's these things do the political winds do shift on these issues, and there will come a time, hopefully very soon, where they shift sufficiently to get these reforms moving.
Okay. So what's next on the commission's agenda? What are you what is the group going to be working on in the next, say, 12 months?
Yeah, so we're actually meeting as a group in person on Friday
Ah,
to
okay.
talk about just that. And so I suspect that coming out of that conversation, we'll have, hopefully some recommendations in the months that follow. We have a few ideas, but I don't want to get ahead of the commission and in sharing them just yet. As you know, we work as a body, and
Mhm.
we advance recommendations that are unanimously consented to by every commission member. And we've got commission members from, every side of the political spectrum. We've got defense lawyers, we've got prosecutors, and when a recommendation comes out of the commission, it's one that really has had stakeholder approval across all the different disciplines. So we'll
Okay.
have more on that in the coming months, Jeff, and I'd be more than happy to come back and talk to you about it.
Okay. Well, we'll hold you to that. But let me ask you this then. I'm not going to ask you to get into the politics, but just on a policy level, I mentioned the gubernatorial race. There is going to be a new governor and a new administration at some point. Um, what should first let's start with the gubernatorial candidates themselves. What are the issues you think you'd like to hear them focus on as we get into the debates and as the campaign heats up? Again, on a policy question, what are the big issues facing the state that they should be focusing on?
Yeah, look, I think that um, the fiscal issues are ones that we really haven't had to worry about
Hmm.
all that much in the last, 6 or 7 years.
Right.
I worked in an administration at a time when, we were in a fiscal crisis, and it wasn't that long ago. And not There's not a lot that has to change in order for us to return
Right.
to being in crisis. Stock market drop or significant correction and a reduction in tax revenue creates, a very difficult set of circumstances for a state where the budget, has probably, close to doubled. I
Hmm.
haven't looked exactly at the numbers, but, from the time the administration switched over to now, we're spending a lot more money. And I'm not making judgments about that
Right.
necessarily,
Hmm.
but if things don't continue to be terrifically, successful on the stock market side and on the tax revenue side, we're going to be right back in that scenario, having to deal with, not being able to make payments, that are required under the statute for the pensions and the rest. So I think that's something that the next governor is very likely to have to deal with. And the issues go from there. I think, on violent crime, I think, the numbers are showing that things are moving, again in the right direction, which
Right.
is great.
Mhm.
And there are lots of factors that impact criminal activity across the state, and they're not just law enforcement related.
Right.
They're socioeconomic, and the list goes on. So we'll have to see how all that plays out. But I am concerned about the fiscal situation, and
Okay.
sort of hoping that it doesn't become a problem. But I think the next administration needs to be prepared for that.
All right. Yeah, and I think our readers are also concerned about that as well. Let me ask you then about the next attorney general. There will be a new attorney general, presumably. You had that job. You're still involved with the criminal justice system, obviously, and the legal system generally. What are the biggest challenges for the next attorney general, do you think?
There's no short of challenges, for the AG in the state of New Jersey, and the truth of the matter is that, having had the privilege of going through this, and having had the privilege of having to prioritize what we were going to do. I suspect and I hope that the next attorney general will do what I think this one did, which is to sit down with people who he or she trust,
Okay.
as well as career people from the office of the attorney general, and that's what we did. We convened a number of times very early on, even before, frankly, I officially started, to brainstorm about what was and what should be, the highest of priorities. What we chose to do, and after thinking about it for quite a while, I went back to the name of the department. We call it the AG's office, but
Mhm.
the actual name is the Department of Law and Public Safety.
Right.
And I said, we should be thinking about public safety. And let's look at, it's very simple, right? Let's look at what's killing people in the state of New Jersey, what's hurting people. And, I guess the number one thing on the list is probably, cardiac disease. Okay, well, we can't fix that.
No,
But,
not
but
your
we,
department.
but we could help
Mhm.
with drug overdoses,
Okay.
right? And we could help with, pedestrian fatalities and car accidents. And we spent a lot of time thinking about those issues. And that's where we decided to focus. And we look, the political environment can create challenges depending on what you want to do and what political environment you're in. For me, I was very fortunate. Right, I had the last 2 years of the Christie administration, and the governor really, you know, gave me complete latitude and support for the things that I thought were important, and things that weren't necessarily typical, Republican type initiatives. So when I went to Governor Christie and said I wanted to reform the state juvenile justice system and knock down and rehabilitate the facilities that
Mhm.
house these juvenile defendants, he said, "That sounds good. What do you bother me for?" I said, "Well, we need $120 million, and I got to go borrow it." And I wasn't sure what the answer was going to be. Right, in a fiscally conservative administration, the answer very easily could have been no. He said, "Look,
Right.
if you think we need to do that, then go and do it."
Okay.
And we went about borrowing over $100 million, to try and help reform that system, and was able to get the support of, then just Senator Scutari and others who
Mhm.
were very helpful in getting it done. So, I am hopeful that the Attorney General, and I don't think we're going to see a change in the Attorney General for at least a year or so.
Right.
But when we do that they follow a similar process, and talk to the career people in the office who have been living with these issues and thinking about these things quietly for most of their career. I promise you, they have ideas.
Okay.
And if you give them the floor and give them the opportunity to voice them, I think, the next attorney general will be really impressed with what he or she hears. So
Okay.
that would be my advice. We've got lots of time between now and then,
Right.
and I'll be watching, with with great interest as to how the process plays out.
Okay, well, let's sage counsel from one attorney general to perhaps the next one. I have to ask you a little bit first about what you see coming out of the new administration in Washington. New Jersey joined the lawsuit challenging the executive order on birthright citizenship. How big a problem? How big a how big a challenge is that going to be for the state coming up?
Look, I wish I could tell you, Jeff, that I knew. I really don't know how things are going to play out. I do know that there is going to be an awful lot of friction, and and I can't predict for you in what areas exactly, but we'll we'll be standing by, ready to assist those who are caught in the crossfire,
Okay,
because there is going to be crossfire here, and I don't just mean between the state attorney general and the new administration on the federal
right.
side.
Hmm.
It will run the gamut, and I wish I had an answer for you as to what to expect. I think we can expect the unexpected,
Yeah.
and I am choosing to try and remain optimistic. And I am optimistic, as I said to Governor Murphy when on inauguration day in 2018 at a church in Newark. I was very optimistic then about the future of the state of New Jersey, and was optimistic in respect of what he would do in his leadership. And I choose to be optimistic until I can't be anymore.
Okay.
I'm going to remain optimistic now, and we'll see how things play out. But I do think there is going to be an awful lot of friction, and I think there's going to be a lot of work for lawyers who are dealing with with the outgrowths of that friction.
Okay. Well, speaking of a lot of work for lawyers, before I let you go, I want to ask you a little bit about the business, the firm itself. How's business? What's the legal business like in New Jersey these days?
Thankfully, Jeff, I don't know exactly how, but lawyers manage to stay, quite busy here in the
Okay.
state of New Jersey, and at least I can speak for our lawyers, and we are very busy, and we are, seeing all kinds of interesting matters. In my practice, most of them involve the government in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a criminal case or a regulatory matter or even civil litigation involving the government. And because we continue to see that activity, at a pretty feverish pace, we've continued
Mhm.
to add folks to the team,
Okay.
and we'll continue to do that to create a bench that I think is uniquely deep, of former state regulators and prosecutors on the one hand, and former federal prosecutors and regulators on the other.
Well, that was the last thing I was going to ask you about. You've added a lot of fairly high profile people, a lot of very accomplished people. I'm guessing that with the change in administrations, some of those people are going to be looking for new landing spots. Are you going to continue to add those kinds of folks?
We're actually seeing a lot of resumes, and I think that's consistent with what you're reading about and seeing in
Right.
the press. And so we're going to continue to be opportunistic. In just the last year, uh, we brought on a former federal prosecutor, Jason Gould, who ran
Hmm.
the healthcare fraud unit for the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey. We brought on the former chief counsel to Governor Murphy, Parimal Garg, the former
Right.
director of the Division of Law, returned to Lowenstein, Michael
Hmm.
Long.
Hmm.
And that's in addition to folks who we brought on in the years before. Barry Albin, former
Right.
Supreme Court Justice. Peter Slocum, former First Assistant AG. Kent Anderson, former DAG. Chris Gerald, who was the former head of the Bureau of Securities. And Alex Shalom, who runs our Institute for Social Justice, effectively our pro bono practice, who, has had more New Jersey Supreme Court arguments than anyone I know. He's had over 100,
Wow.
and just an incredible resource. And
Okay.
on the federal side, Chief Judge Freda Wolfson joined us a couple of years ago. I mentioned McBride. We've got Matt Boxer and the team there is Michael Himmel.
Mhm.
The team there continues to grow too. So we're really proud of that group. I love practicing law with them. In addition to being really smart, effective, and efficient lawyers, they're great people. They're a joy to be around, and they're great, sort of teammates. So we're feeling really appreciative about that, and looking opportunistically to continue to grow.
Okay, very good. Well, we will leave it there and see how it goes. Chris Porrino, partner at Lowenstein Sandler, former Attorney General. Thanks for joining me as always.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to see you.
Good to see you too, and good to see the rest of you. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.